Yep, okay. I would like to call this meeting to order. Could everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Has everybody read the minutes from last meeting, January 4th meeting?
Yes.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And I need, okay. The next item on the agenda is a public, to continue the public hearing. Do I have a motion to continue the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? This is an application for reversal of decision of the code enforcement officer. It's located at 304 Hutchinson Avenue in Wingdale. Would the applicant like to say any other comments, or would you like to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay. You were sworn in at the last meeting.
I was.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Charles Gottlieb from Whiteman, Osterman, and Hanna Land Use Council for Dover Greens LLC. Here this evening with Marion Rebro from Dover Greens and Olivet University in further support of our appeal. We had a submission dated January 11th that was designed to respond to some of the questions that came up at the January 4th meeting, and I'll just summarize that quickly for you. I think we have two main issues here. I think we were trying to split up the two issues at the last meeting. One is a zoning interpretation question. The provision of the zoning code that we're appealing this evening is the term. What is the term necessary permits within 18 months? What does the term necessary mean? And the second issue is we believe and we submit that Dover Greens and the Olivet University campus has vested their rights under New York law so that any site plan or special use permit expiration wouldn't apply. So to that first issue, what does necessary mean? The code enforcement officer has made his determination that the term necessary means all building permits for all buildings within phase one of the development. But we have to be guided by some principles in New York law. Mainly, this board has to look at the plain meaning of the terms within your zoning code. A definition of a term cannot be extended by implication. And you can also look at other provisions in your zoning code for reference when you're trying to come to this type of interpretation. So as we submitted last month and we discussed, the dictionary definition of necessary is absolutely needed. The dictionary definition of all is the whole amount. We submit that the necessary permits that are required to avoid site plan and special use expiration are the permits that are absolutely needed to commence the approved use on the site. In other words, the permits that are absolutely needed to show a commitment to the purpose for which the approval was granted. The notice of violation that we received extends the meaning, the dictionary meaning of necessary, to mean all, the whole amount of permits. But they're two distinct terms with two distinct definitions. Though that extension of that definition of necessary, in our eyes, is unlawful because we can't extend a definition of a zoning term. This could mean it could be one building permit. The permits that are necessary to install the use on the site. Previously to us appealing the notice of violation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, we did meet with the building inspector, and they pointed us in the direction of the Stony Brook Estates development, because they are currently in the long process of renewing their site plan approval. However, we've learned that they have not even pulled a building permit within 18 months. So they don't even reach that threshold of pulling a building permit that allows them to commence the use on the site. So that is why they've had to go through that process. But we submit we are different than that development, considering, as you saw at the last meeting, the work we've done and the building permits that we have pulled. Turning to, the last point on there is I looked at other sections of the zoning code to see if I could get some references or some other indication of what necessary means. And under the Zoning Board of Appeals section of this code, it talks about what happens when this board grants, let's say, an area variance, and when does that expire. And the code says that a variance from the ZBA expires 12 months from approval unless the developer obtains a zoning permit or commences the use within 12 months. So that's different than the language we're discussing here tonight, but they're still talking about expiration of an approval. In that instance, it's expiration of an area variance. In our instance, it's site plan and special use permit. So this board should find that the two should be uniform in their application. And so necessary should mean the necessary building permits to commence the use on the site, which we have done. Now, the second issue, if this board doesn't find, doesn't agree with our definition and interpretation of the term necessary, is have we vested our development rights for the entire phase one? There were a few questions at the last meeting. One was, can vested rights ever be abandoned or taken away in New York? Do we need to have some prejudicial zoning change to have the vested rights doctrine apply to our project? And this board asked for some more specifics on the investments that Dover Greens has made. To the first issue, case law tells us that vested rights can be abandoned. And abandonment can be implied by discontinuing the use. Your zoning code actually discusses this in section 145-62H1, which says that a special use permit is no longer valid if the use ceases for 24 consecutive months. So in that instance, it's just like the vested rights cases. If we've stopped using the property, then you lose your vested rights for the remainder of the development. Here, as you saw at the last meeting, we certainly have not ceased the religious educational use on the property. It's still ongoing today, so we haven't abandoned any vested rights. The second is, do we need some prejudicial zoning change to have the doctrine apply to us? The test for vested rights is only two-pronged. Has substantial construction been made? And have substantial investments been made? And the whole idea is those two questions should lead you to the determination that a developer has shown a commitment to the approved use. Here, Dover Greens has demonstrated substantial construction to the point where they're actively using the campus. There are some vested rights cases that I put in our materials where the use had not even been installed yet, but the investment in the infrastructure was enough to secure vested rights. Certainly, Olivet and Dover Greens have demonstrated we've done construction to the point where we're using the property. And then secondly, substantial investments have been made. We did provide an audit letter from Dover Greens and Olivet University's accountant. If you have any questions related to that, we're here. But what it found was, as of June 30th, 2022, there has been $9,982,152 spent on building improvements, $2,737,909 on land improvements, and in addition to that, some of the items that weren't included in that audit, because that just talked about building improvements and land improvements, we had $8.6 million on physical plant operations, $3.6 million on payroll, $1.3 million in property taxes, and $14.6 million in operating costs. Now, this is well in excess of the monies in the cases that I set forth in the materials where vested rights were found. In a case called Orangetown versus McGee, the court found vested rights with an investment of $4 million. Right, we're upwards of $12.5 million, according to the audit letter. In Schoonmaker v. Maybrook, that was about $700,000. The court still found vested rights there. So even though prejudicial zoning changes aren't an element of vested rights, there still is prejudice if our vested rights are stripped away. We would have to go back to the planning board, which we completely disagree that we don't have to. And one of the things I've learned in attending the planning board meetings is that is not an easy process. So there's our prejudice right there. I think the Stony Brook Estates is now in their 8th month of review for its renewal of its site plan, and I believe special use permit. And in fact, at the January planning, or I think it was the December planning board meeting, the planning board attorney even said on the record that a renewal of the approvals is a higher burden. So right there is what the prejudice that we would face. So tonight, we're here to answer any questions that you might have. We do ask that the Zoning Board of Appeals close the public hearing, deliberate on the matter, and hopefully come to a resolution. With that said, I am done for this evening.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Is anybody from the public who would like to speak? Anybody? Okay. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Joanne, and then second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Debbie,
Those opposed?
who motioned and who seconded?
Who motioned? She motioned, he seconded.
Pat, second.
Pat?
Mr. Patrick.
Please talk into the microphones. Thank
It's
you.
hard. Okay. So now this is where I'm going to need Michael's help. So we're going to discuss the word necessary, correct?
Yeah, that's the,
So we're going to vote on
the
it.
initial question for the board is for you guys to have a discussion about the applicant's position, whether you agree or disagree. And depending on that outcome, if you agree with the applicant, and Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you agree that you've accomplished the necessary component, then I don't think you need to reach vested rights.
That's right. You know, and one of the things we were contemplating as we were preparing this evening was if you do agree with our interpretation that necessary does not mean all, and that we have obtained the necessary permits, we hope that your decisional document will go as far as to say that, and, you know, also to explicitly say that our site plan and special use permits have not expired, and that, you know, we can commence with obtaining the additional building permits to complete phase 1.
Could I ask you a question? In your research on vested interest and the abandonment of the vested interest right that is granted to someone with a site plan, can that occur when, say, some of your buildings are not built or no permits are asked for over a period of time? Did you ever see that as a circumstance, or is it a complete abandonment of the whole project?
It would be a complete abandonment of the whole project. The way vested rights cases work for phase developments like this is, you know, we have our entire phase 1, so we've shown a dedication to using and installing the use on that entire property. Now, if we kind of started to scale back, left the property, then the whole thing is abandoned. But simply because the mere passage of time in developing out here, I think it's 31 buildings, we don't abandon, you know, the remainder of the buildings that we haven't yet constructed.
Okay, thank you.
To add to what Charlie was saying, and Charlie, correct me if you disagree, but I think the line of cases that touch those time periods are in the form of mining cases, where you know, it could take 50 years to complete the the removal of all the stone and gravel in a particular gravel mine. So you may have a situation, I know because we've had them here in town. We had some litigation many years ago that touched on this topic, where the mining company has mined out phase one out of out of a 5-phase project, and phase 3 is intended to start in 15 years. Depending on the life of the mine, you might have a mine that has 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. So there is case law out there that touches upon those very extended periods of time. So it's not a foreign concept. It's actually you may not see it around too much around here because of where we're located. But if we hit Western New York, where there's a lot more mining that goes on versus here, you would see more mining cases and that law develop. But we've experienced that where if you have a what happens if you take 20 years to do your project? It's not a foreign concept for the courts.
Thank you.
Okay. So should we vote?
Yeah, if you guys want to,
Is everybody ready to vote?
there's a few ways to do this. If you can discuss how you want to vote and then put it up for a vote, or you can put it up for a vote and make a determination. It's up to you how you do it. And I'll just say for the board, there hasn't been a lot of discussion amongst the board members, so I haven't prepared a resolution. I intend to prepare a resolution, a written resolution in any way that it gets voted upon. I think it'd be important for us to say, hey, this is how I feel about, the definition. If you can put why, that would be helpful, because our job is to not be arbitrary and capricious. We have to have a basis for how we make our determinations. So I think it'd be helpful if you guys,
So you want a discussion before someone makes a motion? You
well,
want a motion and then a discussion?
I guess you're right. We could make the motion and have the discussion. That's probably, per Robert's rules, more correct. So,
Well, I'll make a motion.
all right, you make the motion first.
Make a motion that the board finds that the word necessary is ambiguous.
Okay. Someone want to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, so then let's have some discussion. If you want to just state why you feel that
Why
way.
you feel it's ambiguous?
Well, I don't agree with council if there's not. I don't agree with council if there's not one building that he got a site plan approval for, a building permit, but the word just hasn't found any meaning when you come into multiple buildings or multiple projects that have multiple buildings. And as I understand, there is no case law interpreting necessary, and there is nothing to provide guidance for us, and I think that that's the proper holding or finding for this board, is to have this deemed to be ambiguous, and therefore the site plan continues forward.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys can take a vote.
Well, does anybody else, we want to know why each person votes that way?
Well,
or-
if you agree, you could all, we have a basis that's in the record. If you guys all agree to that, then you feel comfortable voting on that. And then what I'll do is, per Charlie's request, we'll have a discussion on the vested rights aspect of it, so that we have that for the record. Yeah, if you guys are comfortable, then now I have a basis to put on the record for a written resolution. Okay.
All right, Patrick, you want to go? What- you-
No,
how-
I'm agreeing with what he is saying.
Okay.
I believe that it's an ambiguous, and I
Okay,
agree 100%.
so- Okay. Joanne?
I kind of agree with them.
Okay.
At this point, yes, I do.
I agree also. So I guess we're going to vote. Did we
He's good.
vote?
I just have one question. I understand the motion on the table is for that necessary is ambiguous,
Right.
but is the board going to consider going as far as saying we have received or we have obtained the necessary?
You have
Building-
obtained the necessary
You have, yeah.
permits, yes. So
I
we
was
have-
going to do that in part 2.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's great. I don't care how it goes, as long as, you guys are happy and, council's happy, as long as I can write it up, that's all.
So Greg, if you want, how do we do the voting for you, Marilyn? You
I
have to
just
call
did
the
it.
Roll, okay, you did it, fine.
And
I
I'll
don't have
call
to
the roll.
Call the roll?
Member Orlando? Yes.
Yes.
Member Mendenhall?
Yes.
Member Yeager?
Yes.
Chairman Kaufman?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll help you, let's say, do part 2. So I'll ask a question. Even though we've determined that there's ambiguity in the code, does the board agree with the applicant that they have met the burden for vested rights in the site plan approval?
I believe they have.
Okay. Then what I would do is I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to just put it out there. If someone wants to say, I'm making that motion, okay?
Okay.
All
I
right.
second.
No.
I can't second.
Right, no. So I'll put a statement on the record.
Okay.
Someone will say, I agree with that. I want to make that my motion.
Okay.
Then you have a second. Then we have discussion.
Okay, before you go forward, can you clarify what the difference is? If we find that necessary is ambiguous and therefore they have met the statute, then why do we need to go to the second step of vested interest? What does that do, or what is that accomplishing, or legally what is going on in those two different holdings?
I think what it does is creates a record for the building department as to how to proceed in the future. It certainly gives the applicant a little bit more clarity and security in moving forward and investing more money, proceeding with, continuing to proceed with their plans. And it lets the building inspector know what you guys are thinking if it ever encounters a situation that's similar to this. It may not, but I think it's helpful for the record to potentially do that.
Okay, that was helpful, thank you.
So if there's an agreement that the applicant has expended met the substantial amount of money and then the substantial amount of construction required to commence the use, then I think the motion should be that the board determines that they vested their rights based on the information that's been presented to the board, both in the nature of financial data and construction data, and that we should direct the building inspector to reissue the permits that were pulled. If I have that correct, Charlie, I think you guys had permits that were outstanding. I may be wrong. I thought he.
They were going to renew them, right? You were going to renew them?
It's new permits.
New permits.
Yeah.
Could you put the microphone, please?
Yeah, to be able to continue to pull new building permits to
Okay.
continue with the ongoing
Marion,
construction.
I wasn't sure if there were.
At that specific amount, at that specific time, we didn't have any permits that was like pulled away.
Okay, all right.
Per se.
I just wanted to be clear, because if you did, I just wanted to be specific. But if you didn't, that's okay. So
It happened to be that we completed a couple of buildings and couple of permits, and then we didn't have a new one coming.
Okay.
We're about to submit one. And
The
we
next
said
one.
don't submit because this is happening. So
Okay, understood. Okay, so then it. I don't know if I have to go as far as.
I so move.
Yeah, you so move. Okay, great. Anyway, let me just re-clarify that for everybody. The board is based on the financial data and the construction data presented to the board, it determines that the applicant has in fact vested its rights to the site plan and the special permit. Marilyn, you getting all that? It's just
No, I'm
recorded,
not,
right?
but I watch YouTube next
Okay.
week. I'll catch you.
And based thereon, the applicant has vested its rights to the site plan and the special permit, and the building department, based thereon, can continue to issue building permits for Phase 1.
We need a second.
Now you.
I so move.
Need
Need a
second.
second.
Okay.
It's actually what he said, then you
Right,
second.
right.
So Greg motioned, Debbie second.
Yes.
Member Orlando?
Yes.
Member Mendenhall?
Yes.
Member Yeager?
Yes.
Chair Kaufman?
Yes.
We're, okay, all in favor.
All in favor. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Guess that's it for them, right? They're.
Yeah, we could
ready?
move on to future scheduled meetings. Good night, guys.
Good night,
Thank you guys very
Night.
much.
Yep.
Nothing has come in, so therefore, oh no, I have until the 15th.
Oh, yeah, we did the 15th, yes. Okay, so should I read that about the next meeting?
You don't have to, you
It's
can.
April 5th, and the deadline is March 15th.
Yep.
Could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting and go into executive session litigation? Are we going to do that, or no?
No.
We're not doing that. Okay, never mind. We're going to, motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
Patrick and,
Okay, who motioned?
Patrick motioned and Greg second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?